Good morning, everybody. I'm sure it's still morning. Yeah, it's just about 10 o'clock. So this is going to be part 6. Cheeky's helping me. So part 6 of the winter series. As we all know, I have a lot to say. I really do. Since I came back here in April, this is what I have. This is typed out already, and that's just from April. So, and I'm still writing with my fountain pen. So, I want to start with reviewing something that I said in my 5th episode. I want to talk about facts versus beliefs and facts versus values. And the reason that I want to talk using those terms is because when we are introduced to a subject, how that subject is approached will stick with us for a long time. And I've talked about this before. If coronavirus is just a difficult flu and you'll get over it, then you're not so inclined to follow all the protocols that we're being given, and you'll go without mask and social distancing and all that. I heard a statistic in the States that there's one person dying every 23 minutes or something like that. Right now it's less than 30, not minutes, 30 seconds. It's less than 30 seconds. That is so tragic. And it's because a lot of people were told that it was just a nasty flu and that you would recover. And those people are having a lot of trouble believing the scientific fact. So when we adopt a belief as opposed to a fact, then it's hard for us mechanically in our thought processes to reevaluate that as perhaps being false. And then the other thing is that facts versus values. I'm going to bring this back to horses and people. So I'm always nattering about saddle fit, rider motion, and hoof balancing. So let's take a look at saddle fit. And I'm going to get the bird. She's requesting. Okay, Monster, come on. Come on. Come on. That's the girl. Yes, I know. She says something's happening and I want to be part of it. Thank you very much. Okay, on my shoulder. So when we have a saddle that doesn't fit, there's probably going to be 2 main areas that are, well, I'm going to say 3. 2 main areas and a third one that is equally important. It's going to be too narrow in the gullet, too tight through the wither, and very often too high in the rise on the front of it, which puts a rider in a chair seat. Now, when you have a saddle that pinches the wither, the other thing is the saddle is probably going to be crooked, which means it's going to be low on one corner and high on the other corner at the front. And that usually will travel diagonally across the length of the seat and the underneath panels. Now, let's take the case of the narrow gullet, which is going to press on the transverse processes of the horse's spine and it is going to impede the horse's ability to reach forward with the front leg, because as the front leg moves forward, that brings the top of the shoulder blade back. And if the saddle is too narrow, the saddle will restrict the ability of the shoulder blade to move back in a full range of motion. And if it does come back, it's going to result in inflammation on the top of the wither. So the outcome of that is that the horse can't pick its front feet up close to the perpendicular, as they're going to be farther back, because that allows the shoulder blade, the top of the shoulder blade, to articulate farther forward. That will put the horse on the forehand. And when the front foot of the horse doesn't come off the ground at or near the perpendicular, but behind it, that means that the horse can't take a long step with the hind foot, because it'll step on itself. And the horse isn't going to do that. So they will step short behind to compensate for what the front end is doing. And then, of course, the riding instructor or coach or trainer or the rider is going to say, well, my horse isn't engaging its hind end, and they're going to work towards achieving that goal. But the horse can't do it without a great deal of physical discomfort at the very least, and pain in varying degrees as it tries to offer the rider what they're asking for. That is going to result in, instead of having the pushing power from the hind legs that we so desire, is that the horse is going to be pulling with its front feet to move forward. And what that pulling does is it puts pressure on the toe of the front feet, and that's going to elongate the toe, which your farriers are most likely going to be extremely reluctant to back that additional toe length up. And I see that, especially in North America, over and over and over, whether we're talking draft horses, or we're talking thoroughbred race horses, or standard bred race horses, or upper level dressage and show jumpers. There's only a very few farriers that will actually do the work of backing those toes up. And because what happens with the long toe is it delays the takeoff of the foot, whether it's a front or a hind foot, but particularly the front. We see this in. And then what happens is that increases the delay of the foot coming off the ground and adds increased stress on the hoof capsule and the tendons and ligaments and the bone above. Okay, so saddle fit, and now people are starting to pay their mortgages and build their savings account by being saddle fitters. But again, not all saddle fitters are created equal. And so you have to do your research, and you have to try and expand your knowledge base to see exactly how well your saddle fits. And sometimes what ends up happening is a rider, because these saddles are so expensive now, the rider will say, I can't afford to replace my saddle. And it isn't until somewhere along the line somebody notices that the horse isn't traveling right behind, they go to the trouble of calling the vet, and the vet may or may not be able to identify the problem. And if it continues, then they'll continue to ride, and the degree of discomfort and dysfunction will go to the point where it affects the diagonal front to the hind leg that's actually in trouble because of the hoof balance, saddle fit, rider motion. And by the time that cycle goes around a time or 2 or 3, and the value of the horse is pretty high, and the expectations of what that horse was going to be able to do have to be reevaluated. It's usually at that point the person will say, maybe I should look at buying a new saddle. But when you decide to buy a new saddle, make sure that you have actually, honestly, a certified, a genuinely capable, well-educated saddle fitter to take a look at that saddle. Not just with the horse standing in the hallway in cross ties, but to see that horse move without a rider on, in straight lines, which means somebody has to run along beside it, on the lunge, and under saddle, doing whatever that horse's intended sport is. So it's quite a complicated process, and I want you to really take me seriously on this, because it's a big deal. And if you've already spent thousands, multiple thousands, on your horse, on your equipment, on your board, and your lessons, and your competitive whatnot, and your truck and trailer, and the whole 9 yards, and it all fell apart because you were either not quite wise enough to understand the saddle, or perhaps your riding or your farrier was the circular cause of this problem, or you were just unaware, just completely unaware through naivety. So please pay really close attention to that, and please take me very seriously about that. Now, I'm going to stop this video, and then I'll turn it right back on because I'm already at 12 minutes, and I'll just do that. So I'll be right back.